The casseroles were still warm on the counter when Trevor came up the stairs 2 at a time, and from the sound of his feet, quick and light, Imogen already knew that something in him had gone wrong. She was in the back bedroom of Eleanor's house, peeling off the black dress that had stuck to her all afternoon. Her feet throbbed in the good shoes. Down in the kitchen, people from the church and the curling club were still standing around the squares and the sandwiches, telling stories about the woman they'd buried that morning. Eleanor Whitlock had taught half of them to make a proper pie crust at one point or another. She'd been more of a mother to Imogen than Imogen's own mom had ever managed to be before the cancer took her at 19, and now there was a hole in the world shaped exactly like a small fierce woman with flour on her sleeves. Imogen expected Trevor to come in with red eyes. She thought maybe they'd sit on the edge of the bed and finally let it out together, the way they used to before things got thin between them. Instead he came through the door already grinning, loosening his tie like a man home from a good day. "They read it," he said. "Okonkwo pulled me aside. Gave me the gist." "Read what, the will? I thought that was next week." She turned from the mirror, the dress half undone at her back. "Doesn't matter, Imogen." He sat down heavily, bouncing on the mattress, and there was a shine in his eyes she'd never seen before. Something hungry and cold underneath the joy. "Mum left me everything, the house here, the cottage out on the lake, the place in town, the boat, the investments." He started counting on his fingers like a kid listing what he got for Christmas. $14 million. 14. She should have felt glad. That kind of money could change Jonah's whole life, set up his schooling, take the 3 of them somewhere warm in the dead of February for once. But the way Trevor said her name, flat and a little impatient, made the back of her neck prickle. "That's wonderful," she said carefully. "Your mum wanted to look after you. After us about that." He was still smiling, but the smile didn't reach anywhere. "Okonkwo said you got something too." Her heart lifted. Just a touch. Maybe Eleanor had left her something of her own. The cameo brooch, the quilt her own mother had stitched. Some small thing to hold. "She left you a tin," Trevor said. Imogen waited for the rest. There had to be a rest. "That's it, Mum's old recipe tin. The dented one she kept on the windowsill. Your name was taped to the lid." He let out a short laugh, almost amazed. "I guess she knew where the blood was, eh? Where it counts." He waved a hand at her, the whole of her like brushing away a fly. 15 years. She'd been married to this man for 15 years. She'd worked the early shift at the bakery on Agricola Street through both of his failed businesses, covered the mortgage 2 winters running when his contracting went sideways, driven Eleanor to every appointment at the cancer center, while Trevor said he was too slammed at work. She'd held that woman's hand through the worst of the chemo, made her laugh when she wanted to quit. And here was Trevor, looking at her like she was nobody at all. "Where's Jonah?" she asked. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "At Della's, with his cousins." He checked his watch and she noticed for the first time it was a new one, heavy and gold, nothing like the plain Timex he'd worn for years. When had he bought that? "Look him, we need to talk. About how things are going to be." "How things are going to be," she repeated. "I'm not the same guy I was last week." He stood and walked to the window, looking down at the yard where the mourners stood holding paper plates of her squares. "I've got options now, I've got a future." He turned around. "I think we both know it's been over for a while." The room seemed to shrink. Down through the floor she could hear someone laughing, a real laugh, somebody telling the one about the time. Eleanor backed the truck into the rink boards at Jonah's hockey practice. People were celebrating that woman's whole good life, and up here her son was tearing down everything she'd ever tried to teach him. "You want a divorce," Imogen said. "I want us both to be happy," but his eyes had already gone somewhere she couldn't follow, somewhere she wasn't. "You'll land on your feet, you always do, and who knows, maybe Mum tucked a gift card in that tin." He almost laughed again. "Pick it up from Okonkwo's office tomorrow. He'll have it ready." He straightened his tie in her mirror, fixed his hair, and went back down to play the grieving son for the room. Through the window she watched him clap a hand on somebody's shoulder and throw his head back, charming as anything. None of them knew. None of them knew her marriage had died the same week they buried his mother. Her phone buzzed. "You okay? Haven't seen you in a bit." Imogen's thumbs hovered over the screen and couldn't move. She put the phone down, washed her face, put on lipstick and went downstairs to be the daughter-in-law one more time, accepting hugs and condolences with a smile she'd built out of nothing. But somewhere in the middle of it, between the egg sandwiches and the line of people saying she's at peace now, she made herself a quiet promise. Whatever was in that dented old tin, she would be all right. She'd find a way to stand on her own. She had no idea yet that the tin would do a great deal more than help her stand. Desmond Okonkwo's office smelled of cold coffee and the radiator dust of an old building near the harbor. He was a big, soft-spoken man with gray at his temples and reading glasses he kept pushing up his nose. He'd been Eleanor's lawyer and her friend for 30 years, and when he looked at Imogen across the desk, His eyes were kind in a way that nearly undid her. "How are you keeping?" he asked.
The question almost broke her.
She'd barely slept. Trevor had taken the master bedroom at the house in town and left her the spare, and that morning he'd been gone before she woke, an empty mug in the sink he hadn't bothered to rinse. "Managing," she said. Desmond nodded slowly. He opened a drawer and set a dented metal recipe tin on the blotter between them. It was the color of a robin's egg gone pale, the lid scratched, a strip of masking tape across the front with Imogen written in Eleanor's slanted hand. "She brought this to me 4 months ago," he said. "Made me promise it wouldn't be mentioned in the reading, said it was private. Between the two of you, 4 months ago, right after Eleanor's first bad scan." Imogen's hands shook as she lifted the lid. Inside were the recipe cards, dozens of them, soft at the corners, splattered and brown. The oat cakes and the molasses cookies and the brown bread Eleanor had been famous for. And beneath the cards, a folded letter and a plain envelope, and beneath that a debit card she didn't recognize. "I'll be just outside," Desmond said and let himself out. She unfolded the letter. Eleanor's handwriting filled the page. "My dear girl, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and if Desmond gave you this on your own, then Trevor has shown you who he really is. I'm sorry, love. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I've watched my son go hard these last few years, watched him get hungry for the wrong things and take you for granted while he did it. I kept hoping he'd wake up, but I know my boy, and I know that the day money landed in his lap he'd turn into a stranger, so I made a plan. The card in this tin is tied to an account I opened in your name 6 years ago, in your name alone, and I've put into it steadily ever since. Money from things Trevor never knew about, that were always mine to give. It's all proper. Desmond and the accountant have crossed every T. The CRA has seen every cent of it. There's nothing in there for anyone to take back. The balance last I looked was $16.5 million. The card slipped out of her fingers onto the desk. She read the line again, 16.5, 2 million more than Trevor's 14. "I know it's a shock," the letter went on. "I know you'll think it's too much. But you earned every dollar of it, Imogen, holding my hand through all of it, driving me through the snow to that miserable parkade at the cancer center, making me laugh when I'd given up. You raised Jonah to be kind. You held this family together with both hands, while my son was off chasing whatever he was chasing. This is yours, not his. Yours, but listen to me, don't say a word to Trevor yet. Take your time, get your feet under you, get yourself a good lawyer, protect that little boy. Then when you're safe and only when you're safe, you decide what to do with it. There's an account set aside for Jonah's schooling too. An heiress, all of it sorted. Desmond has the names of people you can trust. Trust them. You're stronger than you've ever let yourself believe, and you are loved. Don't you forget it. Your mother in every way that mattered, Eleanor." She was crying before she knew it, the kind of crying she hadn't done since her own mum's funeral. She pressed the letter to her chest and let herself fall apart in that quiet office with the foghorn going somewhere out on the water. Desmond came back in when she'd settled. He saw the letter in her hand and nodded. "She told you then." $16.5 million, Imogen whispered, as if saying it any louder might make it vanish. 16.6 now with the interest. He sat and slid a folder across. "Eleanor and I spent the better part of a year setting it up. It's a gift made years ago, fully reported, taxes handled as we went. It never touches the estate. As far as the law's concerned, it left her hands long before she did. Trevor has no claim on a nickel of it." He pushed his glasses up. "There's one more thing. She recorded something for you." He turned his laptop around. There was Eleanor sitting in this same office, thinner than Imogen remembered but with her eyes bright and her chin up. Desmond pressed play. "Hello, love." Eleanor's voice filled the room, and Imogen had to put her hand over her mouth. "If you're watching this, my boy broke your heart and I'm sorry for it. I raised him better. I tried to anyway." On the screen the old woman folded her hands. "I want you to hear this from me. Trevor, getting that money wasn't a mistake. I gave it to him on purpose because I needed to know what he'd do with it. Money's a mirror, Imogen. It shows a person what's really inside them. I didn't." She paused, gathering herself. "But you, my girl, you'd have used it to feed people. To build something. That's why you got the bigger share. Now be smart and be careful and most of all, be free. You've earned it." The screen went dark. Imogen sat holding the card, the whole weight of one woman's love and one man's small heart pressing down on her at once. "Take your time," Desmond said gently. "The money's not going anywhere." But she was already standing, already moving, her mind running ahead of her. "I need a bank Trevor doesn't use. I need a family lawyer. I need to get Jonah's papers in order." She thought of all of it. Desmond slid over a second folder: names, a bank manager out in Dartmouth across the harbor far from anyone she knew, a divorce lawyer, an accountant, even a child counselor if Jonah needed one. Of course Eleanor had thought of everything. "Thank you," Imogen said, "for helping her protect me." "Eleanor was my oldest friend," he said, and his voice caught. "And you were her daughter in all but blood. Looking out for you is the easiest thing I'll do all year. She drove home with the tin on the passenger seat, and the card zipped into the inside pocket of her purse, and the whole way across the bridge the number kept ringing in her head, like something her mother-in-law had pressed into her hand. The house in town had changed by the time she got back. The good oak furniture Eleanor's own father had built had been shoved against the walls, and in its place sat a low black leather sectional and a glass table with sharp corners. The family photos were gone from the mantel. In their place hung a framed print of a sailboat she'd never seen. "You're back." Trevor came out of the kitchen with a tumbler of something amber. He didn't drink, or he never used to. "What Okonkwo give you? A gift card? A nice pen?" Her hand found the card through the leather of her purse. "Just some letters. Recipe cards. Personal things." He snorted and gestured at the room. "Designers coming Thursday, we're gutting the place. I'm not living in a museum full of old people pine." He set the sweating glass down on the handmade table without a coaster, and she watched the ring of water spread into the wood, and something in her chest went very quiet and very cold. "That's your mother's table," she said. "Mum's gone." He drank. "I've got plans. The Heritage Trust's got their gala Saturday. I'm putting in for membership now I can actually afford it. The whole crowd'll be there." The Heritage Trust, the same crowd that had passed over his application 5 years back when the check bounced. He'd sulked about that for months. "I'll need the master bedroom by the way. Start moving your things to the spare." She said nothing. She went upstairs and moved her own things. Not because he'd told her to, but because she couldn't stand the sight of that bed. She was hanging up her work aprons in the spare room closet when his phone lit up on the charger by the door. He'd left it again in his rush out. A message slid across the screen. "Can't wait for Saturday, babe. Wear that cologne I like. B." Her blood went cold. "B. Bianca." Bianca Croft, who had stood at Eleanor's funeral in a dress 2 sizes too small, dabbing at dry eyes, who'd put a hand on Trevor's arm and murmured anything you need. The woman whose perfume Imogen had smelled on Trevor's jacket back in the fall, when he said he'd been working late. She didn't try to unlock the phone. She didn't need to. She picked up her own and called Renata. "Can you come now?" she said. "Don't wait for tomorrow." Renata was at the door in 20 minutes with a bottle of red and murder in her eyes. They'd been friends since grade 9 at Citadel High, and Renata could read disaster on Imogen's face from across a room. She kicked off her boots, poured 2 mugs of wine, and said, "Tell me Imogen did, the inheritance, the furniture, the text," and then, because she had to tell one living soul, the tin, the letter, the card. Renata read the letter twice. When she got to the number her jaw actually dropped, and then she started to laugh, big and helpless, a laugh that had no business being in that room and somehow belonged there anyway. 16.5 million, she wheezed. "Trevor has no idea. Does she know the girlfriend?" "No." Imogen surprised herself with how flat and sure it came out, "and she's not going to. Nobody is. Not Bianca, not Trevor, not the church, not anyone. Eleanor said get my feet under me first, and that's what I'm going to do." She thought of the letter of "only when you're safe." "I'm not handing anybody that card before I have to. They find out when it does the most good and not 1 minute sooner." Renata raised her mug. "To Eleanor Whitlock," she said. "Smartest woman in the Maritimes." To Eleanor, Imogen said, and for the first time since the funeral, under all the grief, she felt something hard and bright take shape in her. Something that wasn't quite hope and wasn't quite anger. It felt like a spine. The next morning she called in sick to the bakery for the first time in years and drove across to Dartmouth. The bank manager Eleanor had named was a calm woman who walked her through all of it in a back office for the better part of 2 hours, the balance, the structure, the protections already in place. "This money is yours free and clear," she said. "Your husband can't reach it." By noon Imogen had her own accounts and a meeting set up that afternoon with a divorce lawyer named Camille Fortin. Camille's office was up a glass tower downtown, and Camille herself was sharp-eyed and unhurried, maybe 40. The sort of person who made you feel the problem was already half solved. "Tell me all of it," she said. "Leave nothing out." So Imogen told her. The affair, the furniture, the cold way Trevor had thrown 15 years on the curb. Camille took notes and didn't change her expression once. "Here's what we do," she said when Imogen finished. "We file on the grounds we've got. We ask for primary care of your son. We document every dollar he spends and every day he doesn't show up for that boy. And we make very sure he understands that in a Nova Scotia courtroom, his mother's money doesn't buy him a thing. There's something he doesn't know," Imogen said quietly. "Eleanor left me money too. He thinks I got recipe cards." Camille's pen stopped. "How much?" 16.6 million. Camille set the pen down and, for the first time, allowed herself a small dangerous smile. "Mrs. Whitlock," she said, "you and I are going to get along just fine. We don't say a word about that yet, not a word. We let him push, we let him claim you can't provide for the boy, and then, when the moment's right, we put it on the table and watch him come apart." She leaned back. "That money isn't a weapon. It's a wall. It means you never have to take anything from him to keep your son safe, so we can fight exactly as hard as we need to. When Imogen got home, Trevor had divorce papers waiting on the counter, drawn up 2 days after his mother's funeral. They gave her car, her clothes, 6 months to clear out, and the legal minimum for Jonah. She didn't sign them. She told him her lawyer would have a look, and watched something flicker across his face. Irritation maybe, or the first faint doubt. You can't afford a lawyer, he said. I'll manage. She did not sleep much that week, but she got Jonah up every morning, made his porridge, walked him to the bus, and after he was gone she built her case piece by piece. There was a job in it too, though she didn't go looking for it. Sylvie Arsenault, who'd owned the bakery on Agricola for 30 years and taught Imogen everything she knew about dough, took her for a tea at Tim's and slid a folded paper across the table. The community health board's putting money into a teaching kitchen, Sylvie said. Out in the North End. Free meals, cooking classes, job training for kids who've aged out of care. They want somebody to run it who actually knows how to feed people and how to teach. I'm too old and too tired. I told them there's only one name. Imogen read the offer. The salary was twice what the bakery paid her. You don't need anybody's permission to be worth this, Sylvie said. You never did. Whatever's going on with that man, you can stand on your own 2 feet. I've watched you do it your whole life. Imogen looked at the number, and for the first time understood that even without Eleanor's card she'd have been all right. She'd have more than managed. The card just meant she could build something bigger than herself. It came to a head the way these things do. In pieces, Bianca came with Trevor to the Heritage Trust Gala, and so did Imogen, on Renata's arm, in a deep green dress that made her feel like herself again. At the door a man with a clipboard checked her name and his face softened. Mrs. Whitlock, I'm so sorry for your loss. Eleanor was a founding patron. You're on the permanent guest list. You've always got a place here. Trevor, across the room in a tuxedo she'd never seen, went white when he spotted her. Because he'd been so busy applying for membership, he'd forgotten his mother had secured Imogen's place years before. He came at her hissing that she was embarrassing him, and the chair of the foundation, an old gentleman named Hugh Ainsley with a cane and a quiet voice, stepped in to remind Trevor that the gala belonged to no one in particular. Later from the small stage, Hugh asked Imogen to stand. Eleanor Whitlock spoke of her daughter-in-law more often than of anyone, he said into the microphone, and always with the word family. She told me Imogen was the finest example of service she'd ever known. We're honored to have her with us tonight. The room applauded, and Imogen sat back down with her face hot and her heart full, watching Trevor turn a color she'd never seen on him, watching Bianca lean over and ask him, in a furious whisper anyone could read off her lips, why he'd never told her any of this. She did not tell Bianca about the money. The chance was right there in the powder room, the woman half broken in the mirror beside her, but Eleanor's voice held her steady. Only when you're safe. She said only that worth wasn't a thing you could buy and let the rest sit. After that, Trevor began to come apart, and the more he came apart the uglier it got. There were anonymous texts. One landed while she was watching Jonah skate at the Amera Oval, a strange nice afternoon. He looks happy. Be a shame if that changed. Her hands shook so hard she nearly dropped the phone, but she screenshotted it and sent it straight to Camille, who said one word harassment, and told her to file a report. There was a false complaint to the police. Trevor standing on the porch with 2 officers swearing she'd changed the locks, then going red when the door opened easily under his own hand. The officer, a young woman named Constable Okoro, looked between them and told Trevor it was a civil matter and he was wasting her time. Before she left she crouched to Imogen's level and said quietly, "If anything makes you feel unsafe, you call me. Anything at all." And there was the worst of it, which Imogen only learned because Bianca herself called, weeks later, her voice nothing like the loud, bright woman from the gala. They met at a coffee shop in Dartmouth where nobody knew either of them. Bianca looked younger without the makeup and tired. "He told me you were crazy," she said, turning her cup without drinking. "That his mother left you nothing, that you were making it all up. But that night at the gala, the way those people treated you, the way they looked at him." She shook her head. "I grew up in a townhouse in Spryfield with 4 little brothers and a mum working 2 jobs. I got out by being pretty and finding men who could give me the life I wanted. Trevor was supposed to be the one." A short bitter laugh. "Except he isn't even rich yet, is he? Estate's not settled, and he's already burning through it. Already looking at other women." She stopped. "He asked me to do something. That's why I called you." She turned her phone around. On the screen was a message from Trevor. "Need you to say you saw her drunk in front of the kid. Make it good. There's 10 grand in it." Imogen stared at it, ice in her veins. "He offered me $10,000 to lie about you," Bianca said. "About you and that little boy, and I'm not going to do it. My mum raised me better than that, even if I've spent a few years forgetting it." She met Imogen's eyes. "I'll send you everything, every message. Consider it the only apology I've got. You don't owe me one, Imogen said. Yeah, Bianca said, I do. The emergency custody hearing was set for a Friday. Trevor had hired a slick lawyer and was going for full care, claiming Imogen was unstable, that she couldn't provide, that she'd let Jonah sleep in her bed when the boy was frightened. The morning of, Imogen came up the courthouse steps and stopped, because the hallway was full of people who'd come for her. Sylvie in her church coat, Desmond Okonkwo, Jonah's grade 2 teacher, Renata, Hugh Ainsley in a gray suit, leaning on his cane, Constable Okoro on her day off, and across the hall, standing apart from Trevor and his lawyer, Bianca Croft, who caught Imogen's eye and gave her the smallest nod. Inside, the Honorable Justice Sear, a small woman with a face that gave away nothing, listened to Trevor's lawyer paint his picture and then set down the folder. Money doesn't make a parent, counsel, she said. Show me unfitness or sit down. His lawyer faltered. We'd intended to call Ms. Croft, but I'm here to testify for Mrs. Whitlock, Bianca said clearly, rising in the gallery. Mr. Whitlock offered me $10,000 to lie under oath. I have the messages. The courtroom went so quiet Imogen could hear the radiator tick. Justice Sear's eyebrows rose a fraction. You're alleging he attempted to procure false testimony? Yes, Your Honor. After that it didn't take long. Camille brought the teacher who spoke about Imogen at every conference and Trevor at none. Sylvie spoke about a woman who'd never once let a person go hungry on her watch. Hugh Ainsley told the court what Eleanor had said about her daughter-in-law, and his voice shook when he said it. Constable Okoro produced the threatening text and the false report. Camille laid out the receipts, the affair, the 2 weeks the boy had been parked at his aunt's while his father chased a yacht he'd never set foot on. This was never about money, Your Honor, Camille said. Mr. Whitlock believes $14 million entitles him to his son. But being a parent isn't a thing you purchase, it's a thing you show up for. And by every record before this court, Mrs. Whitlock has shown up every single day of that little boy's life. Justice Sear read for a long time. Whitlock, she said, you've spent the weeks since your mother's death more concerned with her estate than with your child. You filed a false police report. You attempted to suborn perjury. You sent threatening messages to the mother of your son. Money does not impress this court. Character does, and you have shown a profound lack of it. She turned. Mrs. Whitlock, I'm granting you primary care of Jonah. Mr. Whitlock will have supervised access every second weekend, conditional on the completion of a parenting program and an assessment. Her eyes went back to Trevor, hard as the limestone the building was cut from. And if there is one more text, one more lie, one more attempt to game this arrangement, I will hold you in contempt. Do you understand me? Yes, Your Honor, Trevor said to the table. The gavel came down and then Imogen was surrounded, Renata crying into her shoulder, Sylvie laughing, Camille grinning like she'd won the lottery. Across the room Trevor sat alone. His lawyer had already gathered his files. Bianca was gone. He'd gotten exactly the thing he'd chosen, all of it, the money and the houses and the boat, and not a single person to sit beside him. For one breath Imogen felt sorry for him. Then she remembered the text about the rink, and the pity went out of her like a tide. Outside, a reporter from the local paper was waiting on the steps, because word had gotten around the rich heir and the wronged wife. Is it true your mother-in-law left you more than her own son? Imogen stood in the cold spring sun with the harbor wind off the water. Eleanor Whitlock was the finest person I ever knew, she said. She taught me that what you're worth has nothing to do with what's in an account. It's measured in who shows up for you and who you show up for. She left me a tin of her recipes. That was the real gift. The rest is just the means to pass it on. She went and picked Jonah up from Della's where he'd been kept clear of the courthouse, and she held him a beat too long on the front step. You're squishing me, Mum, he said into her coat. Sorry, bud. Just missed you. She made him grilled cheese and tomato soup, the way Eleanor used to, and after he was asleep she sat on the back steps with a mug of tea and watched the last of the snow go gray and soft along the fence line, and felt under all of it a deep and unfamiliar quiet. The teaching kitchen opened that fall in a renovated storefront in the North End, and she named it Eleanor's, with the old woman's brown bread recipe painted on the back wall in her own slanted hand. There were free suppers on Tuesdays and Thursdays, cooking classes for anyone who came, and a paid program for kids out of care who needed to learn a trade and a kitchen that wouldn't turn them away. On opening day Jonah cut the ribbon with a giant pair of scissors and told everyone in earshot that his mum had built the whole thing. Hugh Ainsley came and quietly wrote a check to the program in Eleanor's name. Sylvie came and cried into the bread. Renata came and flirted shamelessly with a man in a chef's coat. And Bianca came, of all people, in a plain coat and sensible shoes, with a story about night classes and a place of her own out in Bedford, and she stood in the doorway looking at the room full of people eating and said, "Thank you for showing me what it actually looks like. Thank you for telling the truth," Imogen said. Trevor didn't come. He'd mostly disappeared into his houses and his boat, and he saw Jonah every second weekend, stiff supervised visits that got a little less stiff over time. He was slow about it, but he was learning to sit on the floor and build the Lego, learning to ask the boy about his day and wait for the answer. Maybe he'd get the whole way there. Maybe he wouldn't. It had stopped being Imogen's job to wonder. Late that night, after the last dishes were done and the lights were off, and Jonah was asleep in his own bed in their small bright house, she sat at the kitchen table and opened the tin. The card was in there still, tucked under the recipe for oatcakes, and once in a while she looked at it the way you look at a thing to be sure it's real. 16.6 million, plus the growth, more than she could spend in 3 lifetimes. It wasn't the number that made her feel rich. It was the line out the door on a Tuesday, the kids learning to crimp a pie, the thank you notes pinned to the wall, the brown bread coming out of the oven exactly the way Eleanor had made it for 50 years. She turned over the oatcake card in her mother-in-law's handwriting, and underneath the ingredients, in smaller letters she'd never noticed before, Eleanor had written, "Feed people. That's the whole secret. Everything else is just flour." Imogen put the lid back on the tin and set it on the windowsill where it belonged, where the morning light would find it first, and went up to bed in a house that was finally, entirely hers.